When Gustav Klimt died in early February 1918, he was one of the most famous painters of his day, and yet he himself had become an unknown quantity. It is almost inconceivable that someone as reclusive as Gustav Klimt would ever have allowed a camera in his studio, but nothing is impossible. Only the film has never been found. So what is more satisfying, to juggle with the imagination, nourished as it is by the hidden, the mysterious, or to unravel the mystery and exchange it for a fact? Anything to do with Gustav Klimt is a cocktail of facts, suppositions and wishful thinking, and this film's no exception. What do those geniuses, Klimt and Mozart, have in common? Both are embraced as though they were intimate friends. Maybe it's easier for a modern society that mistakes market price for artistic value to be on first-name terms with Gustav.
This incredible popularization, this worldwide seepage into pop culture, has made Klimt very one-dimensional. He is the golden artist, the great artist with these incredible orgies of color. But there's far more to him than that.
You can never be on equal terms with Klimt. He thinks and works in broader terms that transcend the individual. He himself was very reticent. He never staged himself in any way.
Art historians have made a big mistake in recent decades by intellectualizing Klimt. I think we need to get rid of all that. Klimt was a very simple man. He shared a flat with his mother and sisters and never had an apartment of his own. I think it's necessary to show Klimt as he actually was for a change.
I think we shouldn't see him as the great artist hero, but to approach him with more realism. To haul him down from his pedestal a little. But that's putting it too strongly.
Vom Stockerl runterholen ist auch schon wieder zu viel gesagt.
Gustav Klimt draws in the crowds and the cash. You can buy his works as fridge magnets. Is it a blessing or a curse that Klimt's work is accessible to all? It doesn't have to be deciphered, and it survives even the most insensitive marketing campaigns without lasting damage.
I'm convinced that Klimt would have had no problem with fridge magnets, ballpoint pens, etc. He struck out along the road of the all-embracing work of art. That's what he lived for.
Somewhat in the shadow of Klimtomania lives the Dutch Klimt expert, Marianne Bizants-Prakken. In Vienna's Albertina Museum, she has for decades built up a familiar relationship with the pencil and charcoal strokes of the artist's graphic works.
The language of lines is a very direct, very personal language. You can feel his personality best in his drawings, and the more drawings you discover, the more subtle the picture you get of him. You start thinking yourself and get new ideas. The criteria become ever more refined.
A Klimt exhibition is a mega event, whether it's in Vienna, Melbourne or New York. This may be due to the fact that the name Klimt can be pronounced effortlessly from Japan to America, and that there are virtually no inhibitions regarding his work. On the contrary, it seems through the ages to quench an inner yearning, transcending all paradigms and trends.
This Klimt has been around for 150 years. My impression is that every decade discovers a new Klimt. This is what characterizes Gustav Klimt, the fact that he has this potential over and over again to be a starting point for so many periods, people and interests, and to remain questionable in the best sense of the term. If there were no longer any questions surrounding Klimt, sooner or later he'd be forgotten. But we see the precise opposite. He remains questionable in the best sense.
Among those present at the opening of the Klimt exhibition at the Leopold Museum in Vienna were the President of Austria and his wife. The enfant terrible of the Austrian modern art scene 100 years ago has undergone a typically Austrian fate. He has become part of the country's indispensable cultural heritage.
Lot 1202, Gustav Klimt für 13.000.
13.000, 14.000, 15.000, 16.000, 17.000, 18.000, 19.000.
Klimt is in, Klimt is cool, and Klimt is expensive. His works have fetched record prices at international auctions.
26.000, 28.000, 28.000, 30.000.
As there are no longer any of the much sought-after gold paintings on the market, millions are now being made with Klimt landscapes, and his drawings are attracting more and more interest too. And given that there are more than 4,000 authenticated sheets, there's still a chance of a bargain.
34.000, 34.000, 36.000, 38.000, für 38.000. 38.000 sind einfach wohlgemut. Zum zweiten und 38.000, Dankeschön, zum dritten.
How it all began. Klimt came from the lower reaches of society in the Austrian Empire. His father, Ernst Klimt, was an engraver. His mother came from the Viennese suburbs. On the 14th of July 1862, Gustav was born, the second of 7 children, in a one-room flat in Linzerstraße in the suburb of Baumgarten. The family were forced to move often. When his father was in work, they lived in simple apartments. When he wasn't, they had to move to the suburb's notorious tenements, the home of immigrants, day labourers and the unemployed. After leaving elementary school at the age of 14, Gustav Klimt managed to get a small scholarship to attend the College of Applied Arts in Vienna, where he was given a thorough training in artistic techniques and composition. In the collection of what is today the University of Applied Art, there's a surprise waiting.
Dann gibt's diesen sogenannten Hauptkatalog.
We have what's called the main catalogue. If you open it, you come to a very detailed description. Preparatory course. And there's Gustav Klimt under figural and ornamental drawing. You can see he was an outstanding student. The professor of painting and drawing was Ferdinand Laufberger.
Ferdinand Laufberger ist der Professor für Malerei gewesen.
Klimt was in his class, and this teacher was very important for him. He certainly extended Klimt's skills. Klimt could learn a lot, especially about this almost photographically accurate way of painting and drawing.
The earliest works of an unknown 16-year-old, done at a time when the townscape of the imperial capital was already beginning to change dramatically.
From the note written by His Imperial Majesty Franz Joseph I to His Excellency the Minister of the Interior, Baron von Bach. Dear Baron von Bach, it is my will that the enlargement of the inner city of Vienna be taken in hand at the earliest opportunity, and that account be taken of the regulation and beautification of my residence, the imperial capital.
This missive from the Emperor inaugurated the building of Vienna's Ringstrasse. The old city walls were pulled down, and a boulevard lined by magnificent buildings was laid out. The style sought to revive past epochs and became known as Viennese historicism. The grand master behind this concept and its execution was the Viennese painter and interior designer Hans Makart. The interiors of these buildings positively wallowed in painterly ecstasy on a theatrically gigantic scale.
It's well known that after the foundation of the secession in 1897, Klimt became a global celebrity, as we'd say these days, but before that he was in the shadows. By then he was already 37, and I find it strange that although he started on a proper career at an early age, far too few people know about it. Together with Franz Much and his own brother Ernst, Klimt formed a so-called company of artists, and they got work. They were 15, 16 and 18 years old. Just imagine. And then, in 1886, when Klimt was just 23, came the major commission for the ceiling of the Burgtheater.
The commission came about to a large extent by chance. Hans Makart had died suddenly, while other major artists were already employed on the buildings in the Ringstrasse. So Klimt was able to sign a contract for 10 ceiling paintings in the Burgtheater staircase. The Klimt brothers and Franz Much were paid the enormous sum of 10,000 guilders.
This led on to this commission here, but you can already sense that Klimt was already following a different path from his brother, or Franz Much. This was the springboard for the secession.
Gustav Klimt painted 13 murals for the free spaces above the arches and between the columns in the staircase of the Museum of Art History. Paintings that were some 12 meters from the normal standpoint of those who would see them. This is too far away to recognize how much of Klimt's personal style was already present in these works. One needs to approach them close up in order to compare them with the work of his brother Ernst and his fellow student Franz Much. Only then can one see how confidently Gustav Klimt dealt with the extremely difficult task. His depictions of ancient Egypt, of Greek and Roman antiquity, were a first manifestation of the revolutionary Art Nouveau artist he was to become. Behind the armoured doors of a safe in the Money Museum of the Austrian National Bank. This institution also possesses a Klimt treasure, a largely unknown jewel dating from 1892, hidden in an unassuming manila folder.
The Austrian National Bank was looking for an artist to design banknotes. Gustav Klimt and Franz Matsch were recommended to them. So here we have two designs by Klimt for the 10 and 50 guilder notes, and the design by Matsch for the 5 guilder note. The directors then gave their assessment, but unfortunately, this was negative. They said the designs were not in line with expectations, and so they were put to one side. The reason given was that they were too one-sided and too unappealing for use on banknotes. That didn't please the artists at all, of course. And, as we can read in an internal minute of the bank's Board of Management, Klimt seems to have complained to the printing works, and it worked.
Offensichtlich Gustav Klimt sich eben beschwert haben bei der damaligen Druckerei und offenbar auch in einer Art und Weise.
The Austrian National Bank paid out the 600 guilders that they'd been promised.
Dass man ihnen die versprochenen 600 Gulden, die sie als Honorar bekommen hätten sollen, dann doch ausgezahlt haben.
A good 100 years later, more designs were produced, this time for banknotes denominated in shillings. One bore the image of Gustav Klimt. It wasn't used either. How Gustav became Klimt. Thanks to their international popularity, Klimt's works are high on the wish lists of the world's museums. When a picture goes travelling today, this is a complex logistical undertaking, combined with a not inconsiderable risk and huge costs. Those institutions are fortunate which, like the Belvedere in Vienna, have large Klimt collections of their own, and thus find themselves more often in the position of lenders. After all, the risk and all the expense is borne by the borrower. One of Klimt's most attractive female portraits is setting off on a journey. Every such journey is sensitive and watched over by many pairs of eyes.
This is Sonia Knips, one of Klimt's most important works. It was his first portrait in square format, and in addition, he completely changed his painting technique. His brother had died, his father had died, and he fell into a real depression. For years, he painted next to nothing, and then suddenly, in connection with the founding of the secession, he became active again, taking his bearings from the Belgian painters in particular. With their help, he managed to find a style of his own once more. This work, Sonia Knips, is one of the best examples of all. It was the start of the Gustav Klimt we know and appreciate.
Sonia Knips is not going to a country where there's a war raging or serious risk of terrorist attack. That would make the insurance unaffordable. Transport and insurance costs for a large Klimt between Vienna and Tokyo, for example, come to around 50,000 euros. The journey being undertaken by this painting is precisely 800 meters, from the upper to the lower Belvedere. Anxious conservators are its constant attendants. On a scale of square centimeters, they use lamps and magnifying glasses to search for the slightest imperfection in the unblemished complexion of Sonia Knips. Hanging the painting is always supervised by the boss himself. It's a ritual. The search for the perfect position may be fascinating or possibly fatiguing for the uninitiated. Often enough, artworks are rehung in the last few hours before an exhibition opens, after already changing places a few times before that. But sooner or later the right position is found. Venice is also worth a trip. Gustav Klimt is being shown at the Museo Correr on St. Mark's Square. Many of the works are coming from the Belvedere in Vienna. The curator is already waiting for the arrival of the transport. A very prominent lady arrives, by boat of course, and then begins the short journey in a blue box, known in the trade as a climate crate, in full public view across St. Mark's Square. If the tourists only knew what was in the box, they would doubtless be keen to photograph it too. The last few meters are upwards. The scaffolding makes it easier to get inside the museum, and then Judith I is ready for inspection. An early painting from the Golden Period, probably depicting Adele Bloch-Bauer. Klimt spent his first visit to Venice in the company of another famous woman. This visit was memorable in two respects.
Klimt was very much a stay-at-home. Okay, he went to Venice a few times, Florence, of course. He visited Genoa and went once to Spain, but that was it. Strange, really, when you come to Venice and find yourself in this wonderful ambiance. Anyway, Klimt inhaled this Venetian air. He enjoyed it. You can tell that from his pictures. And he loved it. But maybe in one respect, he suffered a disappointment.
Aber er hat es auch geliebt und vielleicht auch in einer Hinsicht vielleicht auch eine Enttäuschung erlebt.
On his first trip, you see, in 1899, Alma Schindler, the future Alma Mahler, was here too. She didn't travel alone, of course. Karl Moll was with her, and a large circle of friends. But then something happened here in Venice. Klimt fell in love with Alma Schindler. They kissed, and she gave him a photograph, which he loved. But then the relationship broke up, because Karl Moll discovered that his stepdaughter was starting a relationship with this artist, who was quite a bit older. So Klimt fell in love with Alma, but was still in a relationship with his sister-in-law, Hermine Klimt, and at the same time was falling in love with Emilia Flöger. And then a few months later, his son Gustav Uschitsky was born, and a few months after that, his son Gustav Zimmermann. So it was all very complicated. And while Venice is wonderful, it was here that the relationship with Alma Schindler definitely broke up.
Aber die Liebe zur Alma Schindler ist definitiv hier in Venedig zu Ende gegangen.
So while the failed love story provides enough gossip for posterity regarding Gustav Klimt, the womanizer, his visit to St. Mark's Basilica during this day was of central importance to his future work.
So he went to St. Mark's Basilica. But what did he find here? The glitter of gold. It took him a little while to see the splendid mosaics, and that left such a mark on him that he decided to incorporate gold into his pictures in future.
Gold in seiner Bildwelt unterzubringen und zu verarbeiten.
To each his Klimt. The Leopold Museum in Vienna is preparing for a very special Klimt exhibition. This show too can and will not do without the great paintings from its own or other collections. But the emphasis is on Gustav Klimt, the private individual. This is an area characterized more by rumor and fantasy than provable facts. But there are photographs at least.
It is very fortunate that from Klimt's own estate, from private collections and from public museums and institutions, we have a great abundance of photographic documentation regarding Gustav Klimt. We can show these in a way no exhibition has been able to do before. We have private photos, Klimt celebrating Christmas with his family, and we also have Klimt the public figure, smartly dressed. Klimt in a three-piece suit, Klimt the thinker, and especially famous, Klimt in his artist's smock with his cat. Of course, Klimt has staged himself beautifully here. Facing us in this artist's smock, we see this simple garment. We know it is blue. It survives with these attractive borders at the shoulders, a generous cut, very, very comfortable. And it's a good photograph too. This suggestive look on the artist's face, the face of a sensitive, visually wide-awake individual, and then this very charming duplication in the form of the cat he's holding in his arms.
Und dann quasi diese Verdoppelung sehr charmant in der kleinen Katze, die er im Arm hält.
There's also the private Klimt, the Klimt that needs and seeks his own retreat, and the special place for this retreat is first of all the studio. The studio is a very sheltered space and soon came to be shrouded in legend. There are all the women, the models, arousing all manner of erotic fantasies. The studio easily inspires male fantasies.
No confrontation with Gustav Klimt can ignore his own artistic confrontation with the theme of sexuality. It was an important component in his everyday working life too, and in the scholarly discussion among experts on his graphic work. A considerable proportion of his drawings have an erotic component and make an explicit display of female sexuality. To this day, these drawings are still rejected by a prudish public as obscene and indecent.
To call it pornography is very dangerous. He didn't see it that way himself. He saw eroticism in the context of the great theme of life. It may sound strange, but for him, eroticism had something sacred about it. You see that in his frankly erotic drawings. The mystery of life was always there in this eroticism. Of course, many drawings were very frank, sexually arousing, and he was also publicly denigrated as a pornographer. He was very offended by that.
As an artist, Gustav Klimt was in a very exposed position, and many people would have liked to squint through the keyhole. Very little of what happened behind the studio door can be regarded as certain. A working day lasted 8 or 9 hours, and while working, Klimt would hum or whistle Schubert's Der Lindenbaum. Friends report that Klimt would fly into a rage if he got an unannounced visit, and from the time of his great scandals, about which more later, he had a notice pinned to the studio door that said, "No point in knocking, door will not be opened."
No one watched him as he drew. That was a very private affair. There are reports by contemporaries that he was surrounded by models, but that was all fantasy. He was a very disciplined worker.
To draw something like this in a studio is one thing. The question is, who saw this drawing? Probably only his closest friends. But the painting depicting the same motif was exhibited in public. To exhibit a woman in this condition shook the conventions and moral attitudes of the age and led to vehement debate. Was it possible to confront the public with this? Male visitors to the exhibition, and interestingly, it was also said that the men who visited the exhibitions should protect their wives from such pictures. That says something about this strange relationship between the sexes, very typical of the time. Men who actually understood nothing of these processes, pregnancy, motherhood, were supposed to protect their wives, their mothers, their daughters from them. It was a very interesting debate that Klimt plunged into.
Also es sind sehr interessante Debatten, in die Klimt da hineinstoßt.
The studio, the artist and his model. What might arouse sweaty fantasies in some helps others to understand Gustav Klimt's relationship to women.
He was actually on to a good thing. He had his mother and sisters to look after him. Then there was Emilia Flöger, who certainly took an interest in his art. She was a clever, interesting woman, and he could appear with her in public. Then there were his models and the mothers of his children. In other words, he took from every woman precisely those things that suited him. That's an area where I think he was pretty egoistic.
The extent to which Klimt's image of womanhood was characterized by his lifelong proximity to his mother and sisters is a happy hunting ground for the psychologists. How much was the exercise of his libido tied up with that? But the most important, highly visible result of Klimt's complex psychological structure was reflected in his work. No other artist of the age knew so well as he how to depict this balance between self-assurance, eroticism, beauty and danger. Four studio addresses are known for Klimt in Vienna. All are shrouded in legend, but none survives. His last studio at Feldmühlgasse 11, in the upmarket Vienna district of Hietzing, is now being awoken from its century-long slumber. Recollections of a Friend.
In the vicinity of the Sankt Veit terminus of the underground is a narrow, semi-rural lane where Klimt worked in his final years. I went out to see him there and had difficulty finding the entrance, which was almost hidden behind bushes. But Klimt came out to meet me and took me to the room in which he would work from early morning to evening. Taciturn, like someone who had lost the habit of talking to people, he showed the visitor what he'd drawn in the past few days. He moved the easels with his most recent pictures into the window, and then stood behind you as you looked at them, without saying a word.
We have photographs of his last studio in Hietzing, with the light coming from the north. You can see the desk, the bed where he posed his models. You can see the easels with the paintings. He painted and drew in this room. He withdrew into his own four walls.
To Miss Emilia Flöger.
I am not at home with the spoken word, and certainly not when I'm supposed to say something about myself or my work.
The authentic words of the taciturn artist. When he spoke, he is said to have done so in a broad Viennese accent. So the service provided to visitors in the context of the exhibition at the city's Leopold Museum is all the more surprising.
We
have a series of cases that runs through the exhibition as a kind of leitmotif. They contain the 400 postcards and other correspondence that Gustav Klimt wrote to Emilia Flöger in the course of his life. When you look at these postcards, each one is a little adventure. What are they of? When were they written? How can we interpret the journeys? How did he select them? We have wonderful postcards of the Vienna Werkstätte. They are motifs from his travels. He didn't like travelling, but when he did, he wrote very often. And there are days when he wrote up to 8 postcards just to Emilia Flöger. To Miss Emilia Flöger, 11th of July, 1908. I think I have grown fat. I'll return from Munich with my hair still untrimmed. 24th of February, 1909. What is it about foreign languages in foreign countries? I'm pretty low today, completely withdrawn. 10th of July 1909. I'm afraid I cannot comfort you. You know what pain I feel regarding the boundless stupidity of my contemporaries. I'm supposed to paint a bit more today. It won't go very well. Best regards, Gustav. He's in Paris. He reports on whether he likes the city or not. Then he tells Emilia, and that's pretty unusual, that he hasn't seen any pretty women at all. Nothing worth seeing then in his view. Those are unusual messages. But Emilia Flöger was certainly Gustav Klimt's most important support. Many of my fellow art historians have wondered what sort of a relationship this was. All we know is that the two of them went through life together. The photographs are helpful in this respect. I think we can see that they were both very striking characters who gave each other the best mutual support.
By the time Klimt painted his famous picture of Emilia Flöger in 1902, the indefinable relationship had existed for 10 years already. Emilia's sister, Helene, had married Klimt's brother, Ernst, in 1891. For the two brothers, this marriage meant access to the higher reaches of Viennese middle-class society, and at the same time, entry into a world of everyday refinement. The painting does not seem to have met with the approval of the sitter, and in 1908 Klimt sold it to Vienna's History Museum. It can still be seen there today.
Emilia Flöger wasn't your average lady of the time, but something special. Together with her two sisters, she ran a fashion salon in Vienna. In other words, she was a businesswoman, self-employed, who earned her own money. Unlike most other middle-class women of the age, she wasn't dependent on a man or on being married to anyone. I think that someone like that could treat an artist like Klimt on equal terms, and as a result, this relationship was different from those he had with other women.
In the summer months, Klimt took refuge on the Attersee, a lake in the Salzkammergut in Upper Austria. He spent the time here in the wider circle of Emilia's family, away from Vienna and the constant controversies surrounding him and his work. On the morning of the 11th of January 1918, Gustav Klimt suffered a stroke which left him paralysed down one side. he was taken to the private Dr. Anton Löw sanatorium in the Mariannengasse in Vienna, the very place where Gustav Mahler had died 7 years earlier. Emilia wanted to have him cared for at home, but this proved impossible. After an initial improvement in his condition, Klimt had to be moved to the nearby Vienna General Hospital on the 3rd of February. Bed sores had made it imperative for him to lie on a waterbed. Klimt's medical records have disappeared from the hospital's archive. As a result, we have no plausible explanation for why his characteristic beard was shaved off. Nowadays, people will say it was probably seen as hygienically justified at the time.
Fetch Emilia.
Those are said to have been Klimt's first words after suffering his stroke. The two never married, and they never lived under one roof. It is thought that the couple in his most famous painting, The Kiss, represent the artist and Emilia. She shared his life until his death, but whether they were ever sexual partners will doubtless remain their secret. On the 30th of December 1917, 6 weeks before his death, Klimt wrote the last surviving postcard.
Dear Emilia, circumstances unfortunately dictate that I can only send my best wishes in writing. They are wishes from deep within me, and I wish you the happy new year that we both so urgently need. I think of you a great deal and look forward very much to seeing you. Best regards, Gustav.
At 6 o'clock in the morning of the 6th of February 1918, Gustav Klimt died of pneumonia, caused by the first wave of Spanish flu that was sweeping across Europe. None other than Egon Schiele made the drawing of the dead artist. It depicts an unknown Klimt. In the cellars of the Wien Museum, there is a steel safe containing the death masks of prominent personalities. They were made to preserve the memory of the deceased, Gustav Klimt included. But one might well ask what memories are aroused by this plaster cast. Until the 1960s, Klimt's grave in Hietzing Cemetery was in a wilderness of old trees, overgrown with ivy. Then it was tidied up, in keeping with the surroundings. Revolution. Still bearded and untidied up, Klimt wrote to the Visual Artists Cooperative in the Künstlerhaus, or House of Artists in Vienna.
As is well known, a group of visual artists have been trying for years to get their views of art recognized. These views culminated in the need to bring the artistic life of Vienna into more lively contact with the progressive development of art in other countries. Experience has shown that these efforts have not created the desired understanding. In view of this, the said group of artists has come to the decision to discontinue their efforts within the cooperative and to pursue their goals independently of it.
The result was the formation of the Vienna Secession.
The secession was really conceived as a temple of the arts. We are ascending a staircase here. We are uplifted by our mere ascent. It is not at ground level, it is a temple we are approaching. And then we arrive in this black box, this white cube, where something different happens every time, like a stage with perfect daylight, ceiling light, no windows which might disturb the hanging of the pictures. What we have is almost a church interior. Gustav Klimt, the central figure, the president of this association of artists, how does he present himself? Certainly as an artist. He's wearing neither a tie nor a shirt. He's wearing an artist's smock designed by Emilie Flügel. He has a brush in his hand. That's important to him. He's president of an association of artists. He's standing at an easel. That's how he wants to be seen.
In 1898, the taciturn Klimt painted the picture that better than any words succeeded in documenting the revolution taking place in Viennese art.
The Pallas Athena is the programmatic picture of the secession. Pallas Athena was the goddess of learning and art and of warfare. On her breastplate, she has this famous Medusa head poking its tongue out. This could easily be interpreted as poking out his tongue at all those critics of the secession, and that's how it was interpreted. The other story is that a struggle is going on in the background, a struggle between Hercules and Triton. Triton was a sea monster, Hercules the radiant young hero who of course subdues this sinister, frightful old monster.
Herakles, der junge, strahlende Held, der dieses finstere, fürchterliche, alte Ungeheuer.
And this is nothing other than the struggle of the secession, the young emerging artists against the House of Artists, the obsolete Conservative Artists Association in Vienna.
Der veralteten konservativen Künstlervereinigung in Wien.
Art needs its freedom, and the age needs its art. Not the art of the past, but the art of the present, now. And Klimt took this to heart like no one else. And we see now how passionately these works by Klimt were received, both for and against. What noisy choruses of approval and rejection they attracted, often with a degree of verbal violence that we don't hear today.
For the Secession exhibition of 1902, in honor of the German artist Max Klinger, Gustav Klimt created the Beethoven frieze. The well-known journalist Ludwig Heverschi wrote of this work,
Klimt has put the finishing touches to his very curious paintings, a frieze running around the whole room. This will create a terrible buster in a prudish world.
The salvation of weak mankind, buffeted by hostile powers through the kiss of the whole world, was lost in the uproar that followed. For some, the frieze was frightful, for others, heavenly. The main reason for the scandal was the part of the frieze spanning the far end of the room, which was seen as unacceptably obscene.
Of course, this naked woman did not conform to the bourgeois Catholic idea of society at the time. It was an affront. And even now, sometimes, when the frieze is reproduced, the poor fat nude gets her breasts covered up. When the Beethoven exhibition was first held, a notice was put up advising young ladies under the age of 18 from visiting.
At the time when Klimt unleashed this unparalleled scandal in the visual arts with his explicit depictions of tormented people seeking happiness, another rebel on the Austrian culture scene was starting to write his most famous and most scandalous work. Hardly a year later, Arthur Schnitzler finished his play La Ronde. Both men were hated because they depicted things which were not to be spoken of. Schnitzler saw it as his task to painfully put his finger on the nerve of a society that repressed its emotions. And Klimt, for a long time, was unmoved by the reaction of an hysterical public. He was concerned to present his truth, as seen through his eyes, and using his means. But by 1905 he had reached the limits of what even he could put up with. The Artistic Commission of the Senate of Vienna University must have been speechless when they saw the first of the faculty pictures when it was put on public show for the first time at the Secession Building in 1900. Klimt and Franz Matsch had been given the lucrative job to decorate the Great Hall of the university back in 1894, but Klimt had moved on in the meantime.
His approach to the human body changed abruptly with the commission for the faculty pictures, which had been given to him while historicism was all the rage. But in the meantime, he had turned in on himself. He was influenced by symbolism. And when he actually executed these works, the result was quite different from what people expected of him. You can see this very well in this woman, for example. In her life cycle, she is falling into the abyss. You don't see the body beautiful. He draws all people, the old, the young, the ugly, the beautiful. They are all intended to give expression to a certain state of emotions or situation in life.
The clients didn't want to see emaciated, suffering old people any more than they wanted an orgy of naked truth. The first painting, Philosophy, led to a dispute between artists, the ministry and university representatives, which became so violent that Parliament had to step in.
Then came the picture representing medicine, which showed even more suffering people of all ages. This one here, who floats in the painting, is the eternal giver of birth, is a recurring theme with Klimt, and actually she represents the continuing existence of mankind. This is the culmination of this development. Here you can see precisely what characterizes his art, this tension between sensuality and abstraction. In these studies, he really was concerned to express this floating aspect, which he really internalized through the drawing.
By 1905, the situation had escalated to the point where the floating figures were the by. The ministry insisted that the commissioned paintings be delivered. Klimt refused. He barricaded himself in his studio. The ministry considered sending in the police to force the stubborn artist to hand over the pictures. The journalist and society lady Bertha Zuckerkandel spoke to Klimt and got his consent to publish the interview. It was as if a bomb had dropped.
There's this article by Berta Zuckerkandl, who wrote that people simply could no longer interpret these pictures. There were standard allegories where there was general agreement that this means this and this has to look like this. And in an allegory of philosophy, you probably had to have philosophers standing around. But Klimt had ditched all that and made a very personal thing of it. Who knows what knowledge looks like? And as a result, people ceased to understand, and this lack of understanding led to rejection.
The scandal ended when Klimt repaid his fee of 30,000 guilders and sold the paintings to private individuals. They were stored in an Austrian castle until 1945, where, shortly before the end of the Second World War, they fell victim to the flames. What can be seen today on the historically reconstructed ceiling are colourless reproductions of the paintings, as a gesture of belated recompense, perhaps? True values. It was the well-heeled Jewish members of the Vienna bourgeoisie, industrial magnates like the Lederers, the Blochbauers, the Wittgensteins, who now took Klimt under their wing, paying him improbable sums to portray their wives. And we can see that the connection between Klimt's name and gold and money isn't just a phenomenon of our own time.
In his own lifetime, he was already a big money item, one of the most expensive artists worldwide. For the price of a good landscape or a good portrait, you could even, at the time, almost have bought a villa on Lake Atter.
A few more money facts.
It costs a lot of money to stage a Klimt exhibition, even when you already own a nice lot of Klimts. An exhibition like this will cost, all in all, more than 700,000 euros. That's a lot of money, and much of it goes on insurance and transport. It's not easy with a relatively modest exhibition budget to stage something like this. But we have to be there.
Klimt experts are also gold hunters, sometimes quite literally, such as when traces of gold are found on a newly acquired Klimt painting in the Belvedere in Vienna.
It's possible that this picture once had a gold background. The gold is simply too homogeneous.
Weil das ist mir zu homogen eigentlich, weil es ja überall kommt, überall.
Können wir?
Und vor allem auch da in der Mitte.
What we see very clearly here are these gold areas. The whole picture is strewn with tiny areas of gold. And this gold, as we can now see, isn't painted on or otherwise applied. It's under the paint layer, under this green brushwork that covers the whole canvas. That's why we have to presume that he treated the ground, maybe the whole ground, with a layer of gold. It really does look like that. It's incredible.
The gold of Gustav Klimt. He spread it over his canvases in excess, as though he knew that gold exerts an hypnotic attraction. It is very easy to succumb to the temptation, the seduction, the infatuation of this shimmering glitter. Maybe Klimt used his massive gilding quite consciously in order to distract both contemporaries and posterity from looking too closely at him. an obituary we read, "Behind the wall that Klimt erected around himself, even his friends hardly ever got a look in." And who knows, maybe this wall was also made of gold.